In this video, we're going to talk about buys versus doubleheaders. In the case of an odd division, and we're going to use U12 boys and U12 girls here as our example. I've actually created a separate spreadsheet so we can isolate these two divisions and kind of talk through the choices as it looks like when we actually create our schedule. So let's talk about doubleheaders first. When we have an odd division and we actually create our schedule, the problem is that you don't have that last team. So when we actually build it in the first week to populate the rest of the other 7 weeks, we're just going to, in that field that has no team, because it's odd, we're just going to type in double, and that will then populate that field all the way across. Now, what we like to do, there's 2 ways to look at double headers. In the younger divisions, it almost never works out. The kids get tired, but your choice really is, do I take a team who's right next door to the double and have them do it? In this case, let's say 2, 1, 4, 0, 8, and this gives them back-to-back games. Awfully tiring, but you know, that's one way to do it. Okay. The other way you can do it is to put a team with 1 game in between. In that case, for example, we take team 21405. So that would mean that they have a longer soccer day. This gets to be a little more challenging because it can conflict with dual coaches. If you have a dual coach, like say team 21402, who is a dual coach team, they might not be able to skip or even play a double at all that week because of the conflict with their own. That creates an imbalance in the division because you have some teams wind up playing more doubleheaders than others. What we've done in the past is put this to the DCs and their coaches and have them decide kind of how they want to handle it. In the case of U14 girls last fall, as an example, and last spring, they chose to do doubles. And some teams got more doubleheaders than others, those that were interested. Is that fair? Maybe, maybe not, but that's what the coaches agreed to. If you want it to be fair and equitable, then that means you are discounting dual coaches because, again, sometimes those dual coaches aren't going to be able to pull off that second game with a conflict in the schedule of their other team, depending on the timing and age of that team. So, again, 2 different ways you can do it. You can grab the team that is adjacent to, or you can grab a team that has a game in the middle. And as you create the schedule throughout, you want to make sure that you're trying to be as equitable as you can in terms of those teams that have to do double headers. They are a burden for the families, but coaches and DCs and kids too might like to have the double. Okay, the other theory, and let's go ahead and we'll hide this just so we can focus in on the other schedule. Let's talk about what a bye week looks like. So in the same setup, when we create our week 1 schedule in the template, because we brought it over to our division tab and all of the formulas are in the subsequent weeks, we're going to just type in bye in that odd week field, the team that does not exist, which is usually going to be the last team number in that division spreadsheet, right? That's going to create that so we can see it. Now, as we go through, we can now see that who those teams are that wind up getting that week off. The first thing we want to make sure we're doing is copying those teams out and making sure that we're not doing double duty on the buys, because we're going to take all of those teams next to the word buy and we're going to actually copy week 8 over and just extend the entire thing out. And we're going to use those teams to create that last week 9 game. Typically what you see, just mathematically, and you can see it here in this case, I will wind up creating the same number of games as I will have in the weeks prior. So with a bye week, I've got 4 games, and I'll have 4 games in week 9. That's just kind of an easy visual check to make sure that you haven't missed anybody. Okay, and again, when you create those teams, it doesn't matter what order they're in, just as long as they're kind of playing. I like to just grab them in order if I can. So 11-24 versus 26. You can see them up here, game 1. If the games are too early and you've got time, you can always shift the time around on this just to kind of make the day a little bit lighter. It is week 9 after all, and it will be colder the first weekend in November. That's a consideration. We don't necessarily want to have an 8 o'clock game if we don't have to. and it is super easy just to grab this entire schedule and just drag it down by 1 so that it actually starts, in this case, at 9:30. A little bit warmer in the day, not quite as cold. Field won't be frozen if we're at that point in November. So that's how you do doubleheaders or buys. And when we create our game schedule, we just have to remember that we're going to extend out that last week, and I'll show you what that looks like here in the fall schedule. Let me scroll over. So we created buys for this, and we scroll all the way down here to the bottom, and we actually create our week 9 and extend it out. Now, the only tip that you need to know when you turn this game template into your CSV, you need to make sure that you remove the lines that say buy. Don't change the time on anything because it will simply collapse the schedule. I'm going to take that out just so you can see what that looks like. We delete that line, shift cells up, and now I've got an 8 to 9, an 11 to 12, and a 12 to 1350. So what that does, it actually removes that bye week game out of the middle of that day, so the schedule will reflect that. You don't want to try and collapse the schedule because, again, you're messing with your dual coaches and all the deconflicting that you've already done. You simply peel that line out. Now, another note, remember that we have to have our sort order correct, and I have actually removed line 27 over here. So it's important that when you pull all your buys out, that you go back here and you reorder on the left-hand side. Otherwise, it will create problems on your import itself. Okay, so that's it, doubles and buys. It is easier to do buys in many cases because the kids get tired, the families get unhappy, and the dual coaches don't get to participate. That's one of the reasons why buys seem to be easier. It does drag on into week 9, and there are conflicts with that as well. But when you weigh out the pros and cons, you just have to make the decision on which one is better.